And so what the framework, in essence, promotes is focusing on the capacity of developing the capacity of generalist providers. That's what Kerry Thomas has talked about. It's the only way we're actually going to be able to provide sustainable palliative care services into the future for our population. A much greater collaboration with primary care and aged care providers. We know, of course, that a huge number of the population no, that's not right. What I'm going to say is that the population of people who are in aged care facilities often don't get good palliative care, and a lot of that's structural in terms of how our services are provided at the moment. But given the number of people who actually reside in aged care facilities and who will die in aged care facilities, we absolutely have to do something different about that. Which doesn't mean to say that there aren't, services out there doing really good work, but it's around this whole integrated framework and consistency. Enhancing the consultancy role of specialists for advice and support of generalist providers, that becomes a much bigger part of their work rather than having their own captured population. It's about working, having the specialists working with the people who have complex cases, always keeping the primary care providers involved, but being available, recognising that that's how we can develop the capacity and reserving specialist palliative care for those of a need determined by assessment. So that's my presentation, but what I just wanted to do now, and Claire will organise this when I finish, but there's a whole lot of questions that need to be asked in terms of what the framework proposes and what we understand by palliative care. And because we often all have different understandings of what palliative care specialist or generalist palliative care are, these are some of the questions that I'd like to pose and for you to maybe think about, and that will be included in the questionnaire. So some things like, we know that often hospices provide a combination of specialist and generalist care. Someone said to me, there's a difference between specialist care and special care. And that's one of the things to think about, what we understand by specialist care, because it's not saying that a lot of the services that are currently provided by specialist services aren't special, often with the engagement of the community and volunteers, but are they specialist? Another question is, what's the role of volunteers in the delivery of specialist care? So that's not what's the role of volunteers in palliative care, but what's the role of volunteers in the delivery of specialist care? Because with specialists, the framework puts forward a notion around what our workforce should look like, and it will be identifying things like what qualifications should you have to be called a specialist. Now, in some ways it's easy to say, well, a palliative medicine specialist is a palliative medicine specialist. There's a recognised, accredited program, and they are the easiest to actually define. But what about all of the other people who are involved in delivering specialist palliative care at the moment? And do you effectively accredit the whole team? And what do you need in a team to make it a specialist palliative care team? We use allied health and palliative care a lot, and they absolutely have a huge role. But do a lot of the allied health providers have specialist qualifications in palliative care? And in fact, how do we use allied health providers, allied health carers in palliative care? Because often we have a history of using them currently as bringing in a very compensatory role at the end of life, equipment, things around like some symptom management, acute symptom management. But if you think that the whole way of that the allied health work is from a rehabilitation model around maintaining function rather than compensating. And so we actually don't necessarily use allied health in the best way that we possibly could, bearing in mind that the population's growing enormously. Many more people will be staying at home. One of the things they need to do to stay at home is work out how to best maintain their function so that they can stay at home. So that's another question for you. Kerry talked about the role a little bit of the care providers, the non-qualified staff. So, there's a whole range of titles that you could describe, care assistants or healthcare assistants. But where do they fit? Now, they're not going to fit in specialist palliative care, but how do we need to be supporting them best so that they can actually work with the specialist services? So, and a really tricky one, given that our nursing workforce only has really 3 levels of regulation. We talk about clinical nurse specialists all the time, but a clinical nurse specialist is not a regulated title. So what a clinical nurse specialist can require in terms of qualifications from one city or area to the next can be completely different. So if you're calling yourself a clinical nurse specialist in palliative care, what qualifications do you need to have to make you specialist? Because increasingly, the fact that you've been doing it for quite a while isn't actually enough to make you a specialist. So those are the questions that I'll leave you with for now. There will be much more, but those are just some things to think about, because those are the things we've got to get our heads around in terms of how we might construct a framework differently. Everybody has a place. I mean, for goodness sake, there's more than enough work for everybody, so that's not the issue. It's about how we use the workforce we have in the best way so that, going back to the vision of the strategy, everyone who could benefit from palliative care actually receives it. Thank you.